Joining me on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast, I'm very, very delighted to welcome Menekse Stewart, who is the founder of Marketing Magic, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So if you're a marketer, business owner, somebody who creates content, wants to do, needs to do, has to do marketing for your business, then Menekse is actually the right person to be listening to. And we're going to talk about a very, very hot topic here, which I know is both close to both of our hearts here, which is the whole idea of kind of keeping the human or keeping the humanity within AI marketing. And I think a lot of people are feeling a little bit fearful, a little bit kind of concerned that the whole AI thing is coming for their jobs, coming for their lifestyle, coming for everything around them. So we're going to go hopefully quite deep into this and hopefully put a lot of minds at rest. So welcome to the podcast, Menekse.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to be here and excited to chat about all things AI and marketing.
This is a really hot topic, isn't it? Because I know we had prior to pressing record button, we had a little bit of a conversation that this is something that I think a lot of people need to really get their heads around now, because it's real. It's kind of here. This isn't something that it might arrive, it might come. It's here. It's right now. How are you seeing that play out with some of the connections that you have?
Yeah, so I think especially after ChatGPT initially went public and it was this sort of really, it's the first time we've been able to interact with artificial intelligence. The amount of panic that it caused for people, especially in the sort of creative spaces, creative industries, is, reasonable. It's a reasonable response. And I think that the sort of early 2023 PR war that was happening between some of these big tech companies, and Google was a bit behind, so there was a lot of plants from Google in the media getting really fear-mongering headlines, and we were seeing a lot of that kind of thing happening, that just really continued to fan the flame of fear for a lot of people, regarding what the value of creative work looks like moving forwards. And so the last year and a half in particular for me has really been having conversations about what does it really mean for us to be marketers, for us to be business owners, what is a good use of our time, and what does it really mean for us to be good at what we do? Like, are we the sum of our value that we add into a profit making system, or is there are there other things outside of the functional tasks that we're performing that continue to contribute value, but they're not necessarily measured or as top of mind for people? So a lot of those conversations have been had, and I think that especially when we look at the ethics behind how AI has come about, the outrage that people feel is reasonable. We would not necessarily have given our consent to putting data on the public web if we had realized how it would play out and how it would be used. But we're here now. And so it's just thinking about how do we engage with this, and how do we really take a more mindful and ethical approach to it moving forward as these emerging technologies continue to develop. And those are the sorts of conversations that I'm having in between, coding and talking to AI all day.
Yeah, which of course, we've all fallen into that bit, haven't we? That it's just, it's there, it's a little trusted ally sat by us, and oh, I can't come up with this idea. Right, we know where we're going. Oh yeah, I've got to kind of improve that. We know where we're going, and it's always there, which I think for a lot of us has almost become indispensable. But I wanted to kind of pick up on a word that you used there, which was, what marketers should be. So I'm going to ask you a very specific question there, because I think it's quite a different question to what our marketers could be going forward. But I want to do the should be, because if you're having conversations then, what marketers should be. I know you talk to a lot of creatives. You're in a lot of kind of creative industries that you work with. What collectively then do people think marketers should be?
So I don't know about the collective, but I definitely have my own sort of opinions about it based on my own experience working in marketing and working as a head of marketing and so on for different businesses. And I think, especially when I have conversations with my friends who work in agencies and things like that as well, we really have lost a little bit of what it is to do marketing because of the deliverables that we need to create. And my background, started out in SEO. And so for me, the generative AI is not a surprise because, Google's BERT algorithm in the sort of 2017, 2018 is that first obvious use of machine learning and how it impacts our communication and how we decide to create content. So the sort of generative AI is that next evolution of technology that has been a part of our use of the internet for a number of years already. But what we see with marketing is, if we really break it down, like marketing is about communicating with our ideal customers. It's ultimately how do we get the message across for the brand to the ideal audience in a way that brings them into our world and into our products, our services, our offers. And that sort of, it's a long journey for some. And I think the blur with the internet has been that, where does marketing start and sales end on the internet? And so how marketing has ended up looking for a lot of people is that business owners who are working with agencies or who are setting KPIs for their in-house marketers are expecting sales results from their marketing team. And we're focused on creating content at the end of a new user's journey. So obviously bringing them into our world and, focusing on that conversion copy. How do we get to the top of Google for all of these high intent keywords and that kind of thing? And I think that we've lost a little bit of the art of knowing who our customers are and knowing who our audience is and being able to communicate in interesting and valuable ways beyond just that piece of like how much traffic did we get, how many people visited our product pages this month. And so the idea of what marketers should be, I think, is blurred by this sense of we feel like we need to be able to give much more measurable sales results than typical marketing, especially when you're at a brand level and you're doing brand awareness campaigns, can be done. So that's the should be, and the could be is a separate question.
So what about the could be then? Because the should, I'm totally on board with the way you've defined that, and I think it is so important that, and I often find myself saying to marketers, come on, let's wake up. Collectively we need to wake up because there's so much opportunity, but there's also so many little pitfalls and little holes that you can fall into, and it's very hard to get out of some of these. So I'm saying, you've got to be ever present in the moment, and you've got to just really listen. So I totally resonate with your whole thing about not losing sight of customer, which obviously the AIs can help us at a tactical level, but strategically we've got to be very, very focused on, as you say, the relationships there that are, part of our role and always have been. So what about the could then? If we're taking that's the should, what about the could? What is this opening up for us then as a positive?
Yeah, so I think if you look at how AI can be used, you can, there are functional things that need to happen as part of how we communicate to our audiences. There are frameworks for, creating content that covers the core questions, objections, etc., that people have. So if we think about, things like blog posts, content pillars, videos, all of these things can kind of be broken down into a little bit of a process of how we communicate something effectively and concisely. And those are the functional elements that have taken huge amounts of time from, marketing teams over the last 10 years in particular. If we streamline our creation of those things and we use something like AI to help us with, 70% of the labor that previously had been spent on those things, and we've streamlined the functional, we can get back to having more fun with the delivery of the message. So at the moment, we've fallen into quite a formulaic way of this is the kind of content that we need to create on the internet. This is the kind of, system we need to have in place. And so our focus is systems, content. How do we scale these things to bring more customers in? We don't play with the message in the sense of the format and the way that we deliver things. So because often doing that, if we think about creating a piece of educational content, right? People will be like, oh, I'm going to create a pillar page and then an infographic to go with it because that's going to help with SEO and authority building, credibility, etc. What if instead we, hired an animator or an illustrator and storyboarded something and then created a piece of video content that is completely different to how you would normally deliver that message, but it is, we know our audience well enough to know that they're going to respond really well to video, and we can make decisions that are more creative, that bring our message into different formats that have maybe previously not been explored, but also we can make decisions about our message based on how well we know our customers and how well they engage with some of these different channels and so on. So we can get really caught up in the idea of, what our campaigns and our promotions are, and, the place and where we're doing our marketing and where we're showing up. But ultimately, if we understand what our message is and we understand what our customers are all about, everything else is relatively functional, and it's about reformatting things for different platforms, or bringing in different and interesting ways of communicating those things. But all of that takes time because it is a much more creative process. It isn't as measurable. You can't say like, okay, we're going to come up with a really good concept and storyboard it and get it animated, and it's all going to happen within the next 48 hours, because there are multiple points there where creativity needs time to blossom into something that is usable, and you might need to go back and forth with amends and things like that. And so that creativity factor that when we look at the history of marketing and advertising in the marketing space and the really fun campaigns that have happened, the thing that we're missing as small business owners, as marketers of smaller companies, but even going further up into some of the bigger corporate companies that are much more shareholder focused now, we've lost that space for having fun creative ideas and doing fresh things that are really going to engage with the people that we want to engage with as businesses. And that's really what as a marketer, that's really what we're doing, is we are looking at the ways that our brands can best communicate and engage with our ideal audiences. And those the best is not necessarily the most profitable in terms of like the next 30 days of sales, but the payoff and the return on investment when it comes to the relationships, the loyalty, the advocacy, the word of mouth that get built out when we take risks and do things that are more creative, really can help us to scale much more quickly once we have got into a routine of it, than following the sort of traditional methods of digital marketing. So in that sense of could be, it's like, what would you do? How would you communicate this if there were no expectations or no systems to follow? Like, what would be the freshest, most interesting way that you could deliver this message? And just really stepping out of what we know and thinking about, okay, if I didn't have to get something done by this time tomorrow, how would I want to communicate this message to the audience?
You said 70%. I wanted to come back to that number that you gave there. That's huge. If anybody kind of is listening to this and thinking, hold on a minute, Max is saying that I can actually get 70% of my, in effect, day back to be able to do some of this stuff. So this is not a pipe dream then, is the effective use of AI then, if we're really smart with how and where we put this into practice, where we implement it, we're actually giving ourselves back way over, almost 3/4 of a day back to do the fun stuff, to do the really valuable stuff, to do the thinking stuff. This is a profound change to where we've arrived at over the last few decades, really, which, as you said earlier, is all about its numbers, its analytics, it's gathering evidence, and it's almost beating ourselves up if we're not perfect in that regard. But now we can start to have some real playtime again and actually start to give some real long-term value to the brands that we look after. Is it really 70%, is my question.
Yeah, so I think if we're thinking about the creation of the functional deliverables, it's definitely 70%. In terms of like your work day, the small business owners that I've been working with have gotten 40 hours a month back on average, which is like a working week. So 25% is like the absolute minimum. But for a lot of those people, they're working on their own. They're not necessarily professional marketers. So even with AI, it's taking them slightly longer than it would otherwise. But yeah, 70% is a reasonable reasonable amount to assume when it comes to the actual like implementation of creating assets. I think that where we do need to obviously be mindful is that a lot of the decision making and the strategy and the vision and the ideation, all of that stuff comes before we get to implementation. So I'm always, wanting to, I'm not somebody who, I'm like, I'm not somebody who is an early adopter of technology just because I enjoy something novel. I am very realistic about the tech industry and how misused a lot of our data has been and all of those things. Like, I am a very skeptical adopter of technology, and I'm not somebody who's like, oh, AI is going to create this utopian future, because people's sense of, okay, well, if 70% of my role can be done with AI, then I'm not going to have a job. And that sense of discomfort is a reasonable one to have because of how we see a lot of businesses treating their teams, and this idea that we can just, press out as much profit for each person as possible without taking any responsibility for the knock-on impact that our emerging technologies and innovations are having. And so I think it's important to say it's a reasonable thing to think, okay, well, how do I make sure that my value is communicated? If I'm able to get a lot of the tick off objective things, tick those off as quickly as AI allows. And so I think that in any organization where you're rolling out AI systems, you have got to take an extremely empathic approach to how you do that with your teams, because the sense of reticence that people have towards it really comes down to, personal safety and security. So I'm going to, frame what I'm saying around the fact that it is a reasonable concern to think, okay, but if I automate these elements and the functional stuff that people can see is done more quickly, how do I continue to show that I am an important member of the team? And there's a couple of things there. One, AI without a human expert who knows how to get good stuff out of it is trash. It's like a garbage in, garbage out situation. So there's that side of things. And then on the other side, we as humans are seeing something that can automate the productivity tasks, the knowledge tasks much more quickly than we ever would be able to, conceptualize. Like, I've spent hundreds of hours on individual projects each over the years, doing customer journey mapping and researching for, different projects. To a level that now AI can do in 5 minutes to like 80% of the accuracy that project would have taken me. So I'm like, it's one of those things where the benefit of that is that my marketing goes on to be better, but the negative is that, okay, well, this is a really substantive change that if AI is in the wrong hands, it can be misused and it can have a negative impact. And so that sense of what we're automating directly ties into the metrics that stakeholders and shareholders are looking for because of the way that our economic system values companies, right? It's like, how much profit can be gotten out of a project, et cetera, et cetera. What they have failed to do in building artificial intelligence is anything relational, emotional, cultural, contextual, anything to do with the sensitivities and the empathy and the relationships that underpin what successful business and successful marketing really looks like. So we can very easily get things done, but those things aren't necessarily going to land unless we are really effective communicators and we are, skilled practitioners when it comes to communication. All AI is capable of doing is answering questions very quickly. They're not necessarily factual. They're not necessarily going to be impactful. And they're also not future focused, because AI fundamentally is a probability machine that is giving you the most likely result based on what has happened in the past. So true innovation, truly original creative work is not something that you can easily use with AI, because all it's going to do is give you a potential prediction for how the future could look based on how the past has been. If you want to actually cause disruption and go on down a completely different route. AI can't help with strategy or visioning or goal setting, because it's only ever going to predict based on what has previously happened. So the skill sets that we have as marketers and as business owners shift, because what does it really mean for us to have space for the human creative process, for human relationships, for us to get to know people, for us to respond to the actual needs that humans have, instead of us being in this space of, well, here are all the measurable deliverables that I have been able to provide for this client this week, so therefore they're going to continue my retainer. They're seeing the deliverables, but what they're not seeing is all of the expertise that goes into making sure that those deliverables actually can convert. And so the unpicking that we're doing is understanding that we are very good at what we do as marketers, but for sometimes subconscious reasons that we might want to just analyze, okay, so if I think about what my strengths are and what the things are that make me a really good marketer, is it because I'm really good at spotting trends in data and then connecting them into the business's goals so that we can, tweak our strategy moving forwards? Is it that I can spot a question from a customer and just know exactly that multiple people in our audience are going to be struggling with that, and there's that sense of connection with your audience that allows you to create viral content? There are different things there that we're seeing the results for, and we're not necessarily pressing into it any deeper because we are really busy trying to actually get those deliverables done. But there are things that underpin that mean that your skills in a business are constantly needed, in the sense that effective marketing needs people who are really skilled communicators, but in order to really be able to communicate that without feeling this existential threat from the outside, a little bit of self-awareness might be needed, in terms of just unpicking what those core strengths and gifts are that you haven't necessarily needed to provide previously, because the deliverables did the talking for you.
Yeah, I love the way that you've kind of emphasized that whole thing about playing still to your strengths and your preferences, because I think for all of us, and we're all different, even though a lot of us are the same, but we are different in terms of that kind of combination of, things that we love doing, things that we're good at, things that, our businesses need. And it's almost like if there is that 30% that we need to retain, so 70% can be AI'd, if we call it that as a verb, and then 30% can be something that we retain. That's lovely, because then what we're doing is we're playing to our kind of core, let's call it comfort zone, but we're playing to the things where we add the very most value in what we do. So just then, by kind of logic and just kind of extrapolating that out, then does it mean then that with that 70%, rather than us feeling as though it's a fearful thing, it's coming to take our job, can we actually just reposition our mindset and think, hold on a minute, so I've got that 30% of the stuff that I really enjoy the best, which the AIs aren't so good at, that's now me, a bit of prompt engineering skills so I can now manage and control my AIs. But rather than me thinking, oh, they're coming for the rest of my job, actually have the mindset that says, no, I'm starting to expand my team, because I'm now putting these AI agents around me to actually grow the resource. So it's not a case of it's actually shrinking. It's that we're all, as humans, actually going to be growing with this additional support, because that feels a nice way of repositioning this fear, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think just understanding that the 70% of the work that you're doing, that you do because you have to, is if you like listed out what your dream day was of work, like and loads of people might be like, oh, I don't dream of work, Menekse, and that's a valid thing. But if you just imagine like your perfect day at the office, your perfect day at work, what are the things that are involved in that? Almost no people are going to say, proofreading a 2,000 word content pillar, or whatever it is that you're working on at any given point. But some of those things that take the most time, and actually can be quite creatively draining in a lot of ways as well. Even if you're a copywriter and you love doing proofreading, a lot of what you enjoy is actually the craft of the final piece, which again, if you are able to use AI as part of your processes, when it comes to that, it gives you more space for coming up with, some of the really impactful elements of your copy, your headlines, your subheadings, the structural flow of it, and really being able to focus on it as an art piece rather than focusing on, okay, well, I need to make sure that I've got the SEO keywords in here a certain number of times, and all of that all of that detail side of what copywriting often involves for the internet. So I think that when we think about the mastery behind what it is that we're doing, that 30% is the magic of our work, and we will perform consistently better if we have more space for that. And if we can allow ourselves more space for that, our ideas are just a lot better. If you have creative space in your day, you are better at your job. And that's something that I think until we've spent a little bit of time off the hamster wheel, we don't, it's one of those things where it's like, do I dare jump off this and actually say, yes, I can get the helping hand of AI, streamline some of my work, and then give myself some more time to think about what excellence looks like in my role. That initial step off is really scary, but once we've got that, and we just can kind of get into that space of, oh, I've got creative energy again. Oh, I wonder if I saw that and we're doing this, and maybe we could bring those two things together, and I wonder what that would look like. And you've got a bit more space for that experimentation and the crafting of messages for your audience that take more time than we normally have available to us.
So it feels like then that's a natural way, because I'm just kind of looping back to our title for this conversation, which is very much about keeping the human or the humanity in AI when we're doing our marketing. It doesn't then feel now to me as though that's like an additional task that I have to then, sort of almost add an extra thing on my checklist of what I do in the day to actually add the human back in. It's almost then comes as a byproduct, because if I'm doing the things that I love and the things that I'm good at, there's the human being interjected into the automation just almost by default. So it's not an additional thing I have to do. It just comes out by establishing this mix of the processy stuff AI can deal with, or put my little agents around me to kind of sort that out, and then I can add the value with the important stuff. It's that important stuff that gifts the AIs with the human. So it's nice. It's kind of almost like a win-win then, isn't it, by doing it this way?
Yeah, and I think it's also like, what does it mean for us to be humans at work? Is it, is the thing that we is the thing that makes us the human, the ability to decide which tasks have the best priority for the team? No, it isn't. Like, the relationships are the thing that make you incredibly good at what you do, and relationships are messy. And that is, whether it's with a customer and you're doing voice of customer research, whether it's with team members, whether it's in your personal life, and the fact that, especially for women and people from marginalized identities, you are often dealing with a lot more sort of personal stress, and the weight of carrying different things, what emotions look like in the office and at work. Having more space to be able to have a meeting, and instead of it being a 30-minute meeting that has to end on the dot because you've got to get back and get stuff done, you can spend your time being a little bit more free with your creating those relationships, having those conversations, saying yes to a longer lunch meeting with someone, because that actually the conversations and the creativity that are going to come out of that are going to be much more beneficial in the long run. So it's not even about seeing AI as a human in the sense of it being like a beneficial piece. Like, AI is a tool that we can use, and the cognitive intelligence that AI brings allows us to use our cognitive intelligence in spaces for emotional intelligence, and building out our creative intelligence, and all of those other things that aren't as measurable, and that Silicon Valley has no interest in automating, because those things are not deemed contributors to economic growth. But even like logical flow, and how communication and language changes over time, like those types of things, that as marketers, as communicators, for us to be able to spend time having conversations, building relationships, being in touch with humans will help us to continue to be excellent at our jobs, regardless of how generative AI technology changes, because a tool that helps you communicate is only helpful if you have a contextual, cultural, environmental context within which to have that conversation. And AI cannot do that because it isn't embodied, it isn't part of the sort of social construct of our lives. And so seeing it as a tool rather than as a threat to our humanity, I think is, and a lot of the AI chatbots are given very human names, which I personally think is a mistake because it causes an extra sense of threat to people. If we humanize AI, we are doing it a disservice, and we're also reducing what it means to be human to cognitive intelligence and decision making, which is really, really not the case at all. And if any business owners who strip out their human teams and replace them with AI bots are going to really very, very quickly understand what actually makes a business successful is the people who are involved in it and the people who are able to communicate the brand's message to other people. So I think that even if there is an initial sort of blip in terms of businesses seeing the opportunity to streamline and increase profitability, we're very quickly going to circle back to understanding that human expertise and the sort of teams that build out the empathy of our businesses are the only way that we continue to have customers in 2024 and beyond.
And of course, the way that kind of plays out, I guess, is that if people do choose to take that alternative route, which is very much about the AI can replace everybody and everything, then you become very me too, don't you, as an organization, because the competitor down the road could do exactly the same. The thing that makes you unique as a business is that beautiful cocktail of, with all the challenges that come with it, of the interrelationships between all the humans that you have in your business. It's not to say that these are, it's one or the other. You either go one way, it is a blend, as we're seeing. And that 70-30 thing is a really interesting kind of balance that I hadn't been aware of. And, you're so well experienced in knowing that is the right number. And we'll talk about marketing magic in just a moment. But I think it's just really interesting for people to just take a moment to reflect on what would that ideal split be for us, because if we can open up this time and this energy and this flow of extra communication, because as you've said before, we're not bogged down in just having to do the processing in our roles, then wow, what is that going to open up in terms of pivoting, disruption, competitive opportunity, growth? These are all words that we'd love to be playing with more, but we've always been held back. So now it feels that perfect storm. The tech is now here to enable those things. So when you set up then Marketing Magic, did you have a goal that this was going to be the way forward, or was it more of an iterative thing and it continues to kind of grow without necessarily a very clear definition of what it's going to look like in the future? Or is it very clear to you?
Yeah, so I think it's clear to me like what I want it to achieve, but it isn't clear necessarily what that's going to look like, because of the nature of growth is that you can only like anything that you grow into, you haven't experienced yet, right? So you can have good intentions, but you can never really exactly define what it might look like. And it does look very different now to how it looks sort of 18 months ago. And I actually built it originally to because I briefed my team with repurposing 120 interviews from summits that I'd hosted over the course of the pandemic. And it just kept hitting a bottleneck and nobody was, finishing any of it. And I was like, there is a structure. There's, here's the framework. Here's the, we want it to be a blog post, a social post. Here's the things, the information that you need to pull out. You just need to go through and, pull it out. And it just wasn't getting done. And so that's when I started to look at, using OpenAI to create a framework for repurposing these hour-long interviews into other formats, because we already had the content, we'd already had the conversation. It was literally just a case of reformatting it, and nobody on my team was able to, make the time to do it, because it was time consuming but boring. So there was always just other things that took priority. And so that was kind of where it started. And then I mentioned it in a business group that I was in. I had like 10 people be like, Menekse, you must give us this system, because we too have interviews that need to be repurposed. And then the next, so that was like late 2022. And then the next task, I was like, okay, so one of the things that I personally always procrastinate when it's my own business is building out sales pages. Because I know what the product is, I know what it is, but sales page is a very functional piece of content a lot of the time. And I know that if you commit to writing a sales page yourself, it's going to take you 40 hours to do the research, to put it all together. Like it's a chunky task. And so I was like, what if I could go from idea to implemented in 10 minutes? What would it look like for me to be able to create a sales page in 10 minutes instead of 40 hours? And so that was the second piece that I had sort of built out. And it has grown now to be this, I think we're at like 85 plus tools that are kind of organized by business outcome, and it's really focused on the experiences and challenges that uniquely small business owners experience in people with small teams. Because you are often at a stage with small business owners, you're not necessarily going forward for investment, you don't necessarily have a lot of capital to work with, but you know that you have ideas and things that you want to put out into the world, and there just isn't necessarily the resource to be able to invest in human people to support you until you've got at least one round of an MVP out there. And so Marketing Magic really just kind of continue to grow and build out on the unique challenges that are experienced by that particular section of the small business space. And so it's really very driven based on what the needs and challenges are for small business owners. And we've got thousands of people using this tool now every month, and the average feedback that we get is that it's 40 hours or equivalent. If you work part-time, you're saving the equivalent of a working week every month on both getting momentum for your ideas, because instead of thinking about it for months, you're actually able to just take action really quickly and kind of get the framework out there and make it feel like a real project much more quickly. But then also breaking through overwhelm for all the tasks that need to be done, breaking through the overthinking that comes when we're faced with these big functional pieces, and just being able to really get things out into the world that are our idea, but with all the communication that you need to do in order to get it out there. And then things like repurposing transcripts. Anyone who's got a podcast, listened to a podcast, done a Zoom interview, had a meeting, knows what it's like when you're going back through notes from conversations that have already happened. And things like that take a lot of time, but there's a huge amount of opportunity for us in our businesses to be able to use that asset in different formats as well. So being able to repurpose things was where it started, and where I continue to focus, and where it's going is that the unique element for how I've been working with AI really looks at how do we capture the voices of small business owners rather than sounding very enterprise. And AI tends to come out sounding very businessy because the data that it's trained on is, a lot of public domain business content. But for a lot of small business owners, there's a huge amount of personality in a brand that doesn't necessarily come across in a more corporate space. And so the thing that we consistently get feedback about is the process, the algorithm that we've built with Marketing Magic helps capture tone of voice for the business owners much more effectively. And so that's something that reduces the editing process as well. But all of these things have just kind of grown over time. So it's felt a little bit organic. It's felt a bit out of control occasionally because it's I work in SEO and content marketing is my absolute favorite space to hang out, because you can do strategic positioning and messaging, but you're not having to sort of face the really fast-paced nature of ads and social and viral content, which is just not for me personally. But this has kind of grown a lot more quickly than I normally would have chosen if the space for processing had been allowed. So who knows what the next little while will roll out. But in terms of the focus for all of us as business owners when we're engaging with AI, we really want to be thinking about how do we make more space for the human beings who are involved in our businesses, in our customer bases, in the communities that we impact. What does it look like for us to be able to use AI in a way that allows space for those things, instead of just trying to innovate but not taking responsibility for the impact of our innovations. And that's really an unknown space for a lot of us, but I think it is something that we want to be mindful about as we continue to see tools and technologies emerge and grow over the next 3 to 5 years.
I must congratulate though, Menekse, for the way that you've kind of built this whole tool out, because it is so focused. And for everybody listening, I will put the details and the link in the show notes, because you have to see this. This is something that is being so customer focused. It's built out based on real practical examples of solving challenges and solving needs. This is not an enterprise suite where it's been created in a darkened room and then released to the world. This is something that's been, you can see, very organically created, and I think there's a huge benefit to everybody who's going to be using this particular tool. It's already available in over 30 countries, and there are literally thousands of small businesses using the tool now. So I have to say thank you from the whole world, on behalf of the world, for the hard work that you're doing there, Menekse. It's really, really interesting. So a final tip from you, a final kind of almost like word of wisdom. What would you suggest to somebody who has yet to embrace AI and they need to make that first step? What is the first thing that they can do?
I would always start with something that you always procrastinate or that you find draining when it comes to energy, or something that you don't enjoy, and then use that as a starting point for how could AI make this a quicker process, a more enjoyable process, and start with something that you're just not really enjoying. And it's a good motivator, even if you're, in the face of something new, knowing that a problem that you procrastinate or that takes you a long time, it can be solved, is a good one. So start with something that you don't enjoy or takes you a lot of time, and go from there.
Menekse Stewart, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.